Sam Miller.
Chef Mike.
How you doing?
Fine.
Matt Perroni.
Hello, Chef Mike. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming, guys. Sam Miller, Matt Perroni with Robert Mondavi Private Selection Wines. They're here today with us at Hadco to tell us a little bit about their wines and tasting notes and a little bit of the gamut of how the wines are made. You all ready?
Yes.
Let's go at it. Okay, Matt, let's talk a little bit about the history of Robert Mondavi wines.
Well, it's a very exciting history, Robert Mondavi. Robert Mondavi, the man, started the winery in the mid-60s, 1966, after he broke away from the family winery, the C.K. Mondavi, or Charles Krug winery. Mr. Mondavi was a pioneer in really making Napa Valley a place as far as great wines. He believed that Napa Valley could produce wines that would sit on the table with the great wines of the world. And he achieved that very early on. So it was the first major winery built after Prohibition. Since then, Robert Mondavi, the man, and Robert Mondavi, the company, has gone on to even greater things on a global level. So on top of all the great wineries that we have in California, including our Opus One partnership with the Rothschild family and Arrowwood and Byron and Woodbridge, a lot of wineries that people are familiar with, we also now have partnerships in Chile, where we're producing wine, some extraordinary wines there. We actually make wines in Australia in a joint venture. And we actually make wines and own wineries in Italy as well, which is where the Robert Mondavi family emigrated from originally. When you talk about the private selection wines that we have here, private selection wines really are there to highlight the great coastal growing regions of California. So really the areas of Monterey in the Central Coast and all the way up to Mendocino in the North Coast. They're really made to be wines that are consumed on a daily basis, that really emphasize the great growing areas and the fruit characteristics of the grape itself.
What's the best way for the chefs to explain these wines to sell them at store level?
Well, really the best way is to taste the wines. I mean, really it's your own experience, what you take away from the wines in the whole process of evaluating them. And from that I mean not only just the process of the wine on its own, but the wine with food. So really the best teacher and the best salesman is experience. Opening the cork, smelling, tasting with food.
What's the best process when you're talking to customers?
Well, the best thing is to find out what types of wines they like, what they drink now, how much they experiment with wine, and then find out what purpose they're using the wine for. So is it a specific dinner? Is it with a specific meal? Obviously, you want to know about what the price range is, if it's a special occasion. So really, the best way to do it is to ask questions and to find out what that person is about and preference, and to find out about what the purpose of the wine is. Well, the first thing you're looking for in a wine is you're looking for the color of the wine. So really, if you follow the 5 S's, which is we'll go through as we taste wines today, will be see, swirl, sniff, sip, and swallow. So the first part is looking at the wine, so seeing the wine. And there's certain color characteristics you're looking for in individual wines. When wines are young, especially red wines like we have in front of us, you're looking for colors that are either purple hue to a ruby color. And as wines age out, they tend to take on colors, more brickish colors or mahogany colors.
I see a lot of the tasters who will take their wine and put it up against a white background. What are they looking for?
Well, you're looking for a few things when you're seeing the wine or you're looking for color. You're looking for the actual color of the wine itself. And a lot of times what you're looking for is that top edge or the rim of the color. And that's the most obvious against the white background. So you can see in my Pinot Noir, the color is very ruby colored. And in your Cabernet Sauvignon that you have there, it's more of a purple type of hue. Both indicate young red wines. Then you're also looking for clarity in a wine. So you want to have a clarity to the wine. You don't want it to be cloudy. And you're also looking for a brilliance to the wine. And these wines, obviously, you can see on the background, have quite the brilliance to them. So everything on the color checks out appropriately for both of these wines. Okay. The next thing we look for in wine, and this is part of the swirl process, is you swirl your wine, and you're introducing oxygen into the wine. That's where right now we have in front of us, we have an aroma wheel. This was developed by UC Davis to give some terms in describing individual wines. And it's a lot like cooking in that originally, as you're being trained to be a chef, you know certain aromas and flavors, and as your experience develops, you can go outside that and really isolate specific flavors and smells. So in wine, you would start in the inner circle, and in the inner circle is things such as chemical, spicy, floral, fruity, vegetal, etc. As you develop your palate, you can start to break down these flavors. So we'll use fruity as an example. Fruity can be anything like citrus, berry, tropical fruit. And as you really get into a wine, you can isolate something like tropical fruit into pineapple, melon, or banana flavors.
And chefs, this tasting wheel is available in the chef section of the website. People always talk about the acid, the tannin, they talk about the actual fruit and the finish. What are you actually looking for as far as how the tasting of the wines go?
Well, I think you're really looking for balance, harmony, and some kind of elegance to the wine. And when I say balance, I mean remembering that wines are made from grapes. So the first thing you should get in a wine is aroma. And aroma really describes the smell of the grape itself. As a wine ages out, you have bouquet, and bouquet is part of the winemaking process and part of the aging process. But the first thing you should smell is fruit, and fruit from the grapes. Now, on top of that, there's some wines that have oak to them, some wines that have thickness to them as far as viscosity, and that's stylistic according to the grape or according to the winemaker. So you're really looking for balance in the wine and harmony in the wine.
Okay, Matt, let's kind of start with the basics of the tastings. What are we going to do first?
Okay, well, we talked about seeing the wine, and we've talked about swirling a little bit, which is just give the wine a little swirl and introduce some oxygen, which opens up the aromatics. The next thing is actually sniff, so smell the wine. So you want to stick your nose in and give it a nice big smell. And again, we talked about what you're looking to smell, and first should be, you should smell the grape or the aroma of the wine. Now in these wines, we're going to see probably smell a little bit of oak to the wine. And you'll probably smell some other things that are very natural in the grapes themselves. So for Cabernet Sauvignon, it'll be probably some berry or blackcurrant flavors, maybe some spiciness that could be from the grape itself or from the oak. In Pinot Noir, it's much more of a cherry note, kind of a cherry berry, slightly smoky flavor to aroma to Pinot Noir.
Yeah, I'm getting a slight pepper. Maybe a little bit of black pepper in here. Okay, so we ready to taste?
I think so.
So we're going to take just a little sip here.
Sip.
What are we doing there with that air coming through?
What you're doing is you're again introducing oxygen to the wine. And when we talk about number 4 on the S's would be to sip. And you want to keep it in your mouth for a while because that's really where the most sensation is. And roll it across your palate like you were doing so you can taste it across the entire tongue. That really is going to give you probably the best idea of what the wine tastes like after you've seen the wine, you've smelled the wine, and you've held it in your mouth. Then finally, the best part would just swallow. And that will let you know what the finish of the wine is.
That really opens it up when you put that air through there.
Yes, it does.
Now I noticed at the very end I'm getting that dry sensation there. That must be the nice tannins that are coming in.
Yeah, tannin is pretty much a natural preservative for the wine, and it comes from the grape skins. And in red wines, while the wine is being made, the skin contact is a lot longer than in white wines. That gives, from the pigmentation of the skins, it gives some of the color. And the tannins themselves are, like I said, a natural preservative. They will start to drop out of the wine as the wine ages, and the characteristics of the wine will change. It will get increased bouquet. The fruit may become more subdued, but you'll get much more complexity, nuttiness to the wine, spiciness like you were talking about, a whole bunch of different aromatics and tastes to the wine as it ages out, and it will soften as it ages.
Now this is a nice Cabernet that I'm having here, and as far as I'm concerned, this has got to be one of the best steak wines that you can ever get.
Cabernet Sauvignon is incredibly good with beef. That's probably the classic choice, is beef with Cabernet Sauvignon. And then Pinot Noir here actually is a great wine. We kind of call it as a swing wine because it can kind of go with a lot of different foods. So it will swing with fish like salmon perfectly, but it also is great with poultry. It's good with ham as well. It's very good as a red wine for Thanksgiving or turkey also.
As far as heaviness on the mouthfeel, how would you compare the Pinot Noir to the Cabernet?
Well, the lightest of the red wines tend to be the wines made from the Beaujolais region in France, which is Gamay. And the heaviest wines tend to be those that are Bordeaux varietals or Rhone varietals naturally, which is Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Syrah. Pinot Noir is a grape that originally hails from Burgundy in France, and Pinot Noir is a lighter styled, more elegant of the red wine grapes.
Great. Let's try some others.
Let's do it.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about Johannesburg Riesling.
Well, let's talk about this. It's becoming popular again with a whole new generation of wine drinkers. Most people, when they think of Riesling, think of Germany. That's where the great Rieslings were started. The beauty of the wine is that if you like a little bit of sweetness in your wine, Johannesburg Riesling has that. The other beauty of the grape is that it's naturally high in acidity, so you can have this great acidity in the wine, a little bit of sweetness, which means it's a great sipping wine, but it's also an excellent wine with a lot of different foods.
Great. Now, chefs, as we saw on the winery tour at the preceding of the program here, the white wines are chilled when they're in the initial fermentation to actually hold their fruit flavors, because it actually keeps the expelling of the gases down to a minimum, holding in more of the fruit. But how does it actually keep this much sweetness in there? How do they, is it a late harvest? How do they do this?
Well, this is a lightly sweet wine. The grapes are picked at optimal ripeness. They're not late harvest. It's not late harvest fruit. What you do is you arrest the fermentation. You leave a little bit of residual sugar in the wine. So it's naturally lower in alcohol, and it's naturally just a little bit sweeter than most white wines, which are fermented out dry.
So we know that the yeast will actually eat the sugar, which will produce the alcohol. So by the sugar not being all the way eaten, it actually has a lower
alcohol, exactly.
Great. So it just runs around, what's the alcohol content, would you say?
It's about, on this wine, about 11.5%. Typically, most of the German Rieslings that are made in the traditional style would be about 7.5 to 8.5% alcohol.
Great. Let's start with just smelling here.
Okay.
Boy, that smells like honey.
It's a very unique characteristic. You get that honey flavor or smell to the wine. You also always get a floral aroma, almost always, and some spiciness. And Riesling's great, especially at the time of year, November, for Thanksgiving. But it's really, really great with the new Asian cuisine and this fusion type cuisine. It's a beautiful wine to go with those flavors as well.
And that's a good point, chefs, is contrast. If you're having a very hot food, you're going to want a sweeter wine to contrast that, to kind of put the fire out, if you will, and cool things off. Well, let's give it a taste here. Boy, that is nice.
And Riesling is one of those grapes that on the vine tastes a lot like it does in the glass.
Now, wouldn't this be a great wine for a beginning wine drinker to have?
I think probably to move someone away from wines that are sweet wines, what we would think of as picnic wines, to a wine that's a little more serious, that actually goes significantly better on the dinner table. This is a great introductory white wine, yes.
Great. So really from here, you'd want to get him into the Chardonnays then?
Yeah, although a lot of people stay with Riesling all their life, so...
Not enough alcohol content. Let's move on. All right, Matt, we have a really different situation here. We've got a Sauvignon Blanc and a Fumé Blanc. Kind of enlighten us on these two.
Well, actually, Fumé Blanc and Sauvignon Blanc are made from the same grape varietal. The grape varietal itself is the Sauvignon Blanc grape. Sauvignon Blanc is most popular in Bordeaux region of France, and it's also very popular in the Loire Valley of France. Sauvignon Blanc and Fumé Blanc, the real stylistic difference purportedly is in barrel aging and smokiness of the wine. Actually, the term Fumé Blanc was coined by Robert Mondavi in the mid-60s to differentiate his Sauvignon Blanc from what he thought was more insipid, sweet, poorly made Sauvignon Blancs in California. He had traveled over to France and Loire Valley and tasted the great wines of Pouilly-Fumé and Sancerre and wanted to make a wine that was similar. So the Sauvignon Blanc in the line really emphasizes the very crisp, citrus, and lightly herbaceous notes of the Sauvignon Blanc grape. The Fumé Blanc is barrel-aged, and the Fumé Blanc is a richer, a little bit more thick wine and definitely takes on these oak characteristics, so it's a smokier wine. So stylistically, there's similarities, but in aging and fermentation, there's a lot of differences. So very similar, but different.
Okay, let's start with the Sauvignon Blanc and give it a beautiful nose, nice floral.
Sauvignon Blanc, you get much more of the crisp, citrus, almost a lime blossom with this particular wine on the aroma. And the taste, you can taste that it's very clean. The finish is very, very crisp on this wine.
To me, Sauvignon Blanc is the wine for shellfish.
I think it's an extraordinary wine for shellfish. It's great with that, and it's great with simple fish dishes as well.
Now let's try the Fumé and see if we can pick up
Okay.
the nose first. Yeah, I definitely get the wood on that, the oak.
You definitely will get that. You get some of the same characteristics of the fruit characteristics. You get a lot of still of that citrus tone, a lot of the melon tone to it, but you do certainly get that smokiness in the middle. And this lends itself really well to chicken that has herbs, lemon, Anything that's cooked over wood, that's a white meat, and maybe a little bit more complex fish dishes.
Phenomenal. Mesquite grilled chicken with a nice mango salsa.
Would be excellent with this, yes.
All right, let's go into the workhorse that I feel is of the whites, the Chardonnay.
Well, Chardonnay is certainly the most popular white wine varietal in America still today, and with good reason. And there's been some extraordinary Chardonnays produced. It's a grape that grows very, very well in America.
Well, what I consider Chardonnay is probably one of the best food-friendly wines you can have. What would you say about the actual fermentation or the processing of Chardonnay, and what actually are they looking for when they produce a Chardonnay?
Well, Chardonnay is known as the winemaker's grape because it really lends itself to different manipulations. When manipulations, I mean different fermentation methods, definitely different levels of ripening. Some people like their Chardonnays to be crisp, some like them to be very heavy wines, and it definitely loves to marry itself to oak. So you see a lot of oak aging, a lot of new oak in Chardonnays. Now this style we have in front of us here is certainly not one of those over-the-top or in-your-face Chardonnays. The fruit here is mainly from Monterey. Now this style, you'll probably get a little bit of oak to it, but it's really meant to emphasize the fruit itself. So that tropical fruit aroma, that tropical fruit flavor, a little bit of spiciness from the oak, a little bit of vanilla tones from the wood itself, but really a wine that's going to have enough acidity and enough fruit to really pair beautifully out on the dinner table.
Yeah, and to me there's really two kinds of Chardonnay. There's the kind that's just perfect with the food, that's the lighter style. Like for instance this one here would be great for like a white cream sauce dish because the citrus in here would cut right through that sauce. But then you have the very buttery and heavy oaky Chardonnays.
That's become a very popular style in America as the kind of in-your-face Chardonnay that's really, really rich, really, really ripe, and has a lot of oak to it. And those are great wines, but those wines are a little bit more difficult to pair at the dinner table because they're so over the top. A lot of times you lose some of the prized acidity in those types of wines that you want at the dinner table. So again, I think probably the best way to judge a Chardonnay is if you're still looking for elegance, balance, and harmony in the wine.
You know, Matt, we're actually drinking this wine at room temperature, and it's actually got a fantastic flavor to it. But let's talk a little bit about what the temperature of your wine should really be on a white.
Well, really on white wines, you want them to be chilled, slightly chilled. We'll say room temperature. Back in the days when that was the code, room temperature really meant anywhere but on the white wines from 55 to 65 degrees. So you want them chilled down. Ideally, what you'd like to do is give them about an hour or so in the refrigerator typically before you serve them. If you get a wine too cold and it chills down to 45, 50 degrees, what it does is it really shuts the wine down. It shuts down the aromatics, it masks the flavors. That's why you see a lot of people in restaurants trying to give their wine air and actually trying to warm them up with their hands. Because what you really want is to have it right at that temperature, which really releases the smells, the taste sensation on the palate. That's really the perfect serving temperature is anywhere in that 55 to 65 degree range.
So if your wine's at the right temperature, you want to either hold the stem or the bottom base of your glass. So if it's too cold, you want to kind of warm up the bell.
Right, exactly.
All right, my second most favorite red is probably the Merlot. So let's talk a little bit about this.
Well, Merlot is a grape varietal that makes some of the most classic wines in the world. In fact, some of the most expensive wines in the world upon release are made from Merlot. Merlot's become very popular in the United States of America, and I don't know if it's because people like saying Merlot, or they found a red wine that was slightly more accessible, younger than Cabernet Sauvignon. And Merlot is a grape that's similar to Cabernet Sauvignon in that it has a lot of the same characteristics, that it's usually black currant, cassis. But Merlot is a little bit softer of a grape, so it's a little more velvety, a little more plummy in its texture and its aromatics. So it's a little bit more friendly young, which is why I think the American public loves the grape.
So in reality, a step before Cabernet would be to be a Merlot drinker and then move on to Cabernets.
Right, although they're very, very similar when you move up to the top wines of both Cabernet and Merlot.
Nice berry.
Yeah.
Lots of berry.
And really this style is made to emphasize that berry fruit. So really that berry flavor, a little bit of kind of plumminess to this wine, and definitely probably for Merlot, a little bit of silkiness to the wine as well.
I'm getting a little green pepper.
Yeah, there's a little bit of green pepper, which is very typical of the region, and of course this comes from coastal vineyards as well, mainly from the Central Coast region of California. So that's a very typical kind of a mint smell or flavor to the wine as well.
Yeah, that's what it was the mint. See, you should always taste wines with a friend, and that way you guys can pick out things together. Let's try this one. Wow. Very nice. Very nice. Here comes the tannins. The dryness on the teeth. What a great wine for some steaks. Some pork tenderloins on the grill.
Yeah, a very simple steak. You know, you don't need a sauce, you don't need a seasoning, you don't probably need a rub. You just get a good piece of meat, grill it, pour yourself a glass of Merlot.
Let's get in a little bit more about the food pairings here. I'm going to start on the high end and say maybe a nice braised duck breast on this one.
That would be excellent, and actually Merlot served a lot with duck. Probably with veal, simply prepared as well. It would work as well. And of course, again, the classic pairing would be with beef. But there's a lot of options with Merlot, and it depends on the style of Merlot. This is a softer Merlot, so it can go with a lot of different things. And this one actually probably would go very well with ham as well.
Right, and even on the low end, because of the green pepper essence in here, maybe even a nice sausage sandwich with some grilled onions and peppers in there.
Exactly, or smoked pork chop.
Well, let's go into my favorite wine, the Zinfandel. Now, I want to start with, before we get into the temperature of red wines, what is the characteristics between white Zin and red Zin?
Well, they're a completely different beast. White Zinfandel was actually the first time made as a mistake. It was Zinfandel that didn't ferment all the way out. That was free-run juice. In other words, they pressed it, and this pinkish juice came out. It left the sugar in it and became a phenomenon. Now that phenomenon is dying off. People are starting to pay attention to the grape itself, Zinfandel. Now, Zinfandel does make white Zinfandel, but it's a sweet wine. It's not a serious wine. Zinfandel, the grape itself, makes some of the greatest wines in the world.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about temperature of the red wines.
Well, the temperature of red wines, again, we're talking cellar temperature. So you want the wines to be cool. You definitely don't want them to be hot or even warm. Red wines need to be cool, and really right around 55 degrees is a perfect temperature, cellar temperature for red wines.
So theoretically, I would say pop your bottle of red in the fridge for maybe 8 minutes or so before you open.
That should be perfect. And then the other key to red wine is, especially if you're tasting a bigger wine like Zinfandel, you want to have bigger stems or bigger bowls on your stemware. And that really will allow it to introduce oxygen and will really kind of open up and unleash the aromatics on the wine and soften it there in the glass for you. Interesting on Zinfandel is that it's considered an indigenous grape to the United States now. A lot of people think it goes back to the Primitivo grape in Italy, but it's very hard to prove that link. So it's considered a grape of America now. And because of that, it goes with things we think of as good old American foods. Barbecue, chicken wings, a lot of those types of things. Things on the grill. It's just a great, great wine with those kind of foods.
I love my Zinfandel, number one, because of the great fruit flavor, the way it opens up, and it has a nice tannin on the end, but it has all that nice berry to it, and the color is so ruby. It's beautiful.
It is a beautiful color, and you think it's very easy to remember the flavor characteristics or profile of Zinfandel. Black cherry, black pepper.
Right.
That's simple. A good Zinfandel should have both of those.
It's my favorite grilled steak wine. Wow.
That's a winner, isn't it?
That is phenomenal.
Part of it. But I think really the key, the secret into getting more people to drink wine is to emphasize it not as a mystery, not as this thing that you've got to be very elitist to get into, really more as a simple pleasure, just like our forefathers did and people that preceded us. Pre-Prohibition, that wine was part of every day. And wine in the proper context, wine with good friends, with family, with good conversation, with good food, is one of those things that can make you stop during your day, during your week, during your month, and say, at this moment, life is good. I am happy. Simple pleasure, yes, but don't we need more simple pleasures in life?